Stop everything you're doing right now because WWE just pulled off the most disrespectful, mind-blowing, absolutely insane move in recent history. And I'm about to tell you why Roman Reigns reforming the Shield with new members is either the most brilliant or the most insulting decision WWE has ever made. Seth Rollins is somewhere screaming at his TV, Dean Ambrose is laughing from AEW, and the wrestling world is literally divided down the middle on whether this is genius or complete blasphemy. But here's what nobody else is telling you about these new Shield members, and trust me, by the end of this video you're going to see this entire situation in a completely different light. Let me start by saying this loud and clear for everyone in the back. The Shield was lightning in a bottle. Sierra, Hotel, India, Echo, Lima, Delta. Those letters meant something. They represented three hungry, desperate young talents who took WWE by storm and changed the industry forever. Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose weren't just a faction. They were a brotherhood forged in the fires of NXT and unleashed on the main roster like a tactical nuke. They demolished everyone. Legends, champions, main eventers, it didn't matter. The Shield was unstoppable, unpredictable, and absolutely unforgettable. So when Roman Reigns stood in the middle of that Raw ring and announced he was bringing back the Shield, my first thought was, this man has lost his mind. Because you don't recreate perfection. You don't remake a masterpiece. You don't reboot something that was already perfect the first time. But then he revealed the members, and suddenly this whole thing became way more complicated than anyone expected. Now before I reveal who these new members are, drop in the comments right now. Can anyone ever replace the original Shield members? Or is Roman making the biggest mistake of his career? I need to know what you think because this is controversial. The new Shield members are Jacob Fatu and Bronson Reed. Let that sink in for a second. Jacob Fatu, the Samoan powerhouse who's been tearing through the independent scene and recently made waves in WWE. And Bronson Reed, the absolute monster who's been putting people through tables and destroying everyone in his path. These aren't random mid-carders. These are legitimate threats. These are guys who can actually back up the Shield legacy with pure violence and dominance. And here's where Roman's genius or insanity starts to make sense. He didn't try to replace Seth and Dean with copycats. He didn't look for a high flyer and a brawler to mimic the original formula. Instead, he went bigger. He went more destructive. He built a Shield that's designed for his current era, not the nostalgia of 2012. This isn't the Shield 2.0. This is the Shield reimagined for a Roman Reigns who's no longer the muscle, he's the mastermind. Think about the original Shield dynamic. Roman was the powerhouse, the guy who hit the Superman punch and spear. Seth was the architect, the high-risk innovator. Dean was the lunatic, the unpredictable wild card. They complemented each other perfectly. But this new Shield? Jacob Fatu brings that unhinged Samoan aggression that makes even Roman look calm. Bronson Reed brings the kind of devastating power moves that make audiences gasp. And Roman's evolved into the strategic leader who doesn't need to be the muscle anymore because he's got two absolute monsters doing his bidding. But let me tell you why half the wrestling world is absolutely furious about this, and rightfully so. The Shield name carries weight, carries history. It carries the memories of countless classic matches, iconic moments. When Roman slapped that name on a new group, he essentially said that the Shield was never about Seth and Dean, it was always about him. And that's where the disrespect comes in. Seth Rollins has been carrying Raw on his back for years. He's been the workhorse, the guy who shows up every single week and delivers. He was the architect of the Shield's success just as much as Roman was. And Dean Ambrose, now Jon Moxley, went on to prove he didn't need WWE or the Shield to be a megastar. He became one of the biggest names in wrestling on his own terms. So for Roman to reform the Shield without even acknowledging their contributions, that's a slap in the face to both of them and to every fan who loved the original trio. Here's a question for you, and I want honest answers in the comments. Is Roman honoring the Shield legacy or destroying it by bringing in new members? Be honest, because this is the debate that's tearing the wrestling community apart right now. Let's talk about the execution because the way WWE revealed this was absolutely perfect from a shock value standpoint. The entire episode of Raw, there were these cryptic videos, these mysterious messages, these hints that something big was coming. People were speculating everything from Bray Wyatt's return to a new supernatural faction to an NXT invasion. Nobody saw the Shield coming because, frankly, nobody thought Roman would be audacious enough to do it. Then that music hit. That iconic Shield theme that makes every hair on your body stand up. The arena went absolutely insane because for a split second, everyone thought the impossible was happening. Was Seth coming back to Raw? Was Dean somehow returning to WWE? The hope, the excitement, the nostalgia all hit at once. And then Jacob Fatu and Bronson Reed walked out in tactical gear, and you could feel the confusion ripple through the crowd. Some people popped because these are incredible talents. Some people booed because this felt like sacrilege. And some people just sat there in stunned silence trying to process what they were witnessing. That's the mark of a truly shocking moment, when the audience doesn't know how to react because they're experiencing too many emotions at once. Roman stood in the ring with this look on his face that was part pride, part defiance, like he knew exactly how controversial this would be and he did it anyway. And then he grabbed the microphone and said something that's going to be quoted for years. The Shield was never three men. The Shield was an idea. And that idea is back. That line right there is either the most brilliant justification or the most arrogant dismissal of Seth and Dean's contributions. Because if the Shield was just an idea, then the men who made it legendary don't matter. Any three dominant wrestlers could carry that banner. But that's not true, is it? The Shield was special because of the chemistry, the timing, the unique talents of those three specific individuals. You can't just plug in new people and expect the same magic. But here's where I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute because Roman might actually be onto something. Wrestling evolves. Factions evolve. What worked in 2012 might not work in 2026. The original Shield thrived in an era of authority storylines and full-time rosters. Today's WWE is different. It's more athletic, more diverse, more unpredictable. Maybe Roman recognized that trying to recapture the original Shield would be impossible. So instead he's building something that fits this current landscape. Jacob Fatu is one of the most exciting big men in wrestling today. His agility combined with his power is something we haven't seen before. He can go move for move with cruiserweights and then turn around and destroy heavyweights. That's a different dimension than what the original Shield offered. And Bronson Reed is legitimately terrifying. When he hits that tsunami splash from the top rope, you believe someone might actually die. That level of devastating offense makes this new Shield instantly credible as a threat. Drop a comment. Which member of the new Shield is going to break out as the biggest star, Jacob Fatu or Bronson Reed? I've got my prediction, but I want to hear yours first. Now let's address the elephant in the room that nobody's talking about. This new Shield formation tells us everything about Roman's current mindset. He lost the championship to Cody Rhodes. The bloodline fractured. The Usos are doing their own thing. Solo Sikoa created his own version of the bloodline. Roman's empire crumbled, and his response was to go back to the well, back to the one faction that made him a star in the first place. That's not confidence, that's desperation disguised as strategy. Roman is trying to reclaim relevance by using the Shield name as a shortcut. Instead of building something new from scratch, something that could stand on its own merits, he's borrowing equity from the past. And that raises a serious question about his creative direction. Is Roman Reigns the visionary leader he claims to be? Or is he so terrified of becoming irrelevant that he's clinging to nostalgia? The original Shield didn't need a legendary name to get over. They created their legend from nothing. They were three NXT rookies who showed up and immediately became the most important act in WWE through pure talent and chemistry. This new Shield is starting with a massive name and massive expectations, which means if they fail, the damage to Roman's credibility will be catastrophic. Here's another angle that's absolutely fascinating. Seth Rollins is currently on Raw. He's going to have to respond to this. What does he do? Does he ignore it and pretend like Roman's new Shield doesn't bother him? Does he confront Roman and demand answers for why he's replacing him? Does he try to form his own faction to rival this new Shield? Every option creates compelling television, and WWE knows it. Imagine Seth cutting a promo about how Roman replaced him like he was nothing, how the Shield was supposed to be about brotherhood but Roman only cared about himself. Imagine Seth saying he's going to destroy this new Shield just to prove that the name means nothing without the right people wearing the vest. That's money. That's the kind of personal, emotional storytelling that wrestling fans crave. And what about Jon Moxley? He's in AEW, but you know he's watching. You know he has opinions. Could this lead to some kind of cross-promotional acknowledgement? Probably not, but the fact that fans are even discussing it shows how much this decision matters to the broader wrestling landscape. Question for the comments. Would you want to see Seth Rollins destroy the new Shield? Or should he stay above it and focus on his own path? Let me know, because both options have merit. Let's talk about what this means for Jacob Fatu and Bronson Reed individually. These guys just got rocket-strapped to the main event scene. They're now forever linked to one of the most iconic factions in wrestling history. That's a blessing and a curse. The blessing is obvious: instant credibility, instant attention, instant positioning as major players. The curse is that they'll be constantly compared to Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose, two of the biggest stars of this generation. Every move they make, every promo they cut, every match they have will be measured against the impossible standard of the original Shield. If they succeed, if they somehow manage to create their own identity within the Shield framework, they'll become legends. But if they fail, if this new Shield falls flat or breaks up prematurely, they'll be remembered as the guys who couldn't live up to the legacy. That's enormous pressure, especially for Jacob Fatu, who's relatively new to the main roster scene. But here's what gives me hope for this faction. Roman Reigns is a better leader now than he was in 2012. The original Shield was three equals who functioned as a unit. Roman was the muscle, not the mouth. He wasn't cutting the promos or making the strategic decisions. But now, Roman's evolved into one of the best talkers in wrestling, one of the smartest ring psychologists, and one of the most compelling characters WWE has produced in decades. With Roman as the clear leader and strategist, brothers handle the violence. It's a division of labor that could work brilliantly. The question is whether WWE will commit to this long-term or if this is just a short-term shock angle. The original Shield lasted about 2 years before Seth's betrayal split them up. Will this new Shield get that same runway, or will creative abandon it after a few months? Wrestling history is littered with reboots and revivals that started hot but fizzled quickly. Here's my bold prediction, and tell me if you agree in the comments. This new Shield will last exactly until Roman wins back the championship. Once he's back on top, he won't need the Shield anymore, and he'll discard Jacob Fatu and Bronson Reed just like he discarded the Usos when he didn't need them. Roman's pattern is clear: he uses people to regain power, then kicks them aside once he has it. Let me bring this full circle because we need to address the fan reaction that's exploding across social media. Twitter is a war zone right now. Half the wrestling world is excited to see where this goes. Excited for Jacob Fatu and Bronson Reed's opportunity. Excited for fresh matchups and new dynamics. The other half is disgusted, offended that WWE would dare tamper with Shield legacy, angry that Roman would be so arrogant, nostalgic for the real Shield that can never be recreated. And both sides are right. That's what makes this so compelling. This new Shield is simultaneously a creative risk worth taking and a potential disaster that could backfire spectacularly. WWE rolled the dice on this one, and we won't know if it pays off for months. But love it or hate it, everyone's talking about it, and that's exactly what WWE wanted. The Shield is back, but it's different. It's bigger, it's more destructive, and it's under the complete control of Roman Reigns in a way the original never was.